Oh, it doesn't usually take this long. Come on, record button. There we go. Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest Keep Optimising live panel Q&A webinar where we bring our experts from the month back to chat with all of you. And in May, the topic has been Google Ads. So that's what they're here to help you with. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're going, what is she on about? Well, the Keep Optimising podcast is a marketing podcast. It's comes out every Wednesday, and across each month we focus on one topic, and as we're focusing on that topic I get on a series of experts to talk about it from different angles. And we've just been covering Google Ads, and at the end of the month I get as many of the experts as can make it back to answer the audience's questions and some more of mine, to be honest. And we're lucky enough to be sponsored by Klaviyo, which enables us to do all this and to help all you guys out there too. Now I can see we've got quite a few people logging in here. If any of you want to add any questions, please add that in the chat box if you're watching live right now, because the sooner you ask those questions, the sooner we can answer them for you. So who have we got coming up as today's guests? We've got Becky Hopkin from Digital Gearbox. She came on the podcast to talk about the latest and greatest and cool little things you can do with Google Ads, and her team are offering a free pay-per-click consultation via keepoptimising.com/cruise if you want your PPC ripped apart, or suggestions, helpful suggestions and ideas of where to go next and the next thing to do, then that's a great thing to do. Along a very similar line, our next guest, Justin Seibert from Direct Online Marketing, is also offering a free audit, this time incorporating both SEO and digital ads. And you can find details of that at directom.com/keep. And I will, once somebody else is talking, I will copy and paste these into the chat box for those of you who are watching live. And on the replay, we'll include links to all of this as well. So feel free to scribble it all down and go and take a look right now. But we're also going to make it a bit easier and give you something you can actually click on. And then we have a stand-in, because unfortunately Richard couldn't join us. We've got an amazingly awesome replacement. We have Henry Gill, who's head of PPC at Ecom1, and they are offering because Richard came on and talked exclusively about Google Shopping and the latest things you can do there, the latest ways to improve your results. And at Ecom1, they're offering a free webinar. You clearly like webinars because you've signed up to this one. So they're offering one too, which is specifically on maximizing your Google Shopping revenue for 2021, and that's at training.ecom1.com/shopping-ads-webinar. And write those down, or we'll be sharing them in the chat box imminently. I will be sharing them in the chat box imminently, just in case any of our panelists are going, what? I was supposed to be able to copy them. No, I will do that for you. Don't worry about it. And those of you who are waiting on the replay, how would you know if you're waiting on the replay? The email that goes out with the replay will also have links to those amazing resources. So I actually suggest probably you want to go and check out all three. And then there's me. I'm the host of the Keep Optimising podcast, also the host of this webinar. You can find the Keep Optimising podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those good places. And we are about to be covering SEO, but more on that later on. Oh, in fact, she says, going too many slides. These are our guests. I think it's time I stopped wittering on and we got rid of the slide deck and we got the guests out. So guys, could you please turn your video and your audio on, please? Here we go. Hello, Henry. I saw you pop up first. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Not too bad. How are you?
Yes, not bad. Good to have you here. Thank you for being able to stand in for Richard. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you for the kind introduction. I hope I live up to the billing.
I'm sure you will. And Becky, hello. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. The sun is out after weeks and weeks of rain, so I'm very, very happy about that.
Me too, although I have to say somewhat barraged at home. For those of you not in the UK, I live in Cornwall. So those of you who, someone hit something. That's okay. We've gone back. That's good. So I live in Cornwall, which is like, I know the bit I live in is a bit like the Hamptons. and it's gone insane. At midnight on Saturday, there were people queuing in 3 lanes 200 miles away to get here. So I'm just staying in the house, pretty much, and avoiding all the people, which is just my natural inclination. That's got nothing to do with COVID at all. Over in the US, possibly in the Hamptons, who knows? We've also got the marvellous Justin Seibert. Justin, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you today, Chloe? Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. We have a meeting of Google ad minds from across the oceans. So where do we start? I suppose, well, the title of this webinar is I'm about to ask my questions, completely forgetting that one of our lovely participants has already jumped in with questions. So let's start with a biggie, one of my favourites. Interested to hear what you three think on this one, which is, do brand ads erode organic search? I.e., are we paying for something we could get anyway? I would say you should be running branded ads. Becky and Henry are nodding. Let's go to Becky first. Do you want to give a slightly more intelligent answer than mine on this one, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does depend on what your brand is and who your competitors are. So if you've got competitors bidding on your brand, then obviously you want to be bidding on your own brand, because otherwise they're going to be ranking above you. So that's kind of number one thing to check. Second reason I like doing it is that it gives you complete control over what you say in that listing. So if you've got any offers you want to add in, any sales got going on, you can quickly update your ad and let people know about it, rather than waiting for the lovely SEO call to happen and track to update. And you can use all those lovely extensions as well to highlight the promotion. So there's 2 reasons. I don't want to steal all the limelight. I'll let the chaps have their little input on here.
Henry, you were nodding too, so I'm guessing you agree we should be bidding on brand.
I do. I think there's a slight caveat, which is that it's very important to report separately on brand rather than organic. So, yeah, certainly agree it can be worth appearing. I think the very fact that you get clicks on the brand ad means that you wouldn't necessarily get the clicks anyway, because people click on that ad, your ad obviously, but they probably would be clicking on competitor ads as well. I think, yeah, very important that you don't lump everything all together, because as you would expect, brand ads generally have exceptionally high conversion rates. One thing which is kind of worth mentioning is that it's obviously down to the client whether they want to bid on the brand or not. We find it in the occasions where we have bid on competitor ads, we get conversions through there. So it's very likely that's happening in reverse as well, where the competitors are getting conversions from your ads. So I think it would be one interesting approach. Actually, one of my clients did was they've called up all of their competitors and they kind of jointly agreed. It was a very small industry actually selling frozen fish, but they jointly agreed not to bid on each other's brand terms. I think that actually is probably quite a good solution if you can kind of come up with that agreement with your competitors. But yeah, I'd say at the very least, important to segment. I think it is worth bidding on. Potentially, you might be kind of paying for some of the conversions you would have anyway. But I think, yeah, definitely worth appearing if your competitors are bidding on your brand terms.
Yeah, and the cost is so negligible, isn't it? I was think it's kind of more of an insurance campaign than anything else. How about you, Justin? What's your perspective on brand bidding? Any extra tips?
No, I mean, I think they covered it really well. I just would echo what Henry said in particular about measuring it separately, because I think that's a trick that either agencies or in-house people will sometimes just show the blended cost per acquisition numbers or things like that to people and really not tell the full story. So if you're doing this practicing on your own, you want to make sure that you understand them completely differently. If you are getting help from an outside, make sure you're getting the reports so that you can see the difference between the two.
Yeah, it is kind of like a red flag if your agency's bundling it all together, I would say. And I want to explore this a little bit more deeply, actually, as we've had the question asked. So the first angle I want to go on is, how do we stop brand terms ending up in our other activity? Because that's a game it's quite easy to spend a lot of time playing, is trying to get all your branded activity to appear in the right place. Becky, again, you were nodding voraciously on that one. So.
Yeah, because it's the thing that people often forget. You just got to add your brand terms as negative keywords in your other campaigns. So you want to make sure you've got your URL in there, your brand name, any potential weird misspellings. Have a look through your search terms in your brand campaign and stick them all in as negative keywords in your other campaigns.
I think that was pretty comprehensive, guys, don't you? Is there anything else there?
Just one very small thing I would add, which is with dynamic search ads. This is something kind of quite new that we tried doing about a month ago. And we kind of initially looked at the results, and the ROAS was absolutely fantastic. And what had happened was that pretty much all the conversions were coming from branded terms. So absolutely, as Becky said, very important to add the negatives, but particularly important to do that for dynamic search ads, because there, from my experience so far, like pretty much it seems to really skew towards brand terms. So exactly, say kind of add the brand name as a negative and as many misspellings as you can. You can look in the search term results to add in the negatives rather than have to come up with them yourself, obviously.
Okay, so my other additional question around brand terms is there ever an argument for using RLSA? And I'm going to let one of you explain what that is as well. So get ready. Is there an argument for using RLSA to take a different brand ad approach in front of different audiences? And Justin, you gave a wry smile when I mentioned RLSA, so I'm going to come to you first, if that's all right.
Sure. So I have an ongoing battle with our reps over at Google, and I refuse to say remarketing. I still call it retargeting, but retargeting lists for search ads. So it's a way that you can kind of combine retargeting with search, and so that you're bidding separately to audiences that have previously visited your site in a particular way. So there are two primary ways that you can do it. One is that you can advertise on keywords that you won't advertise on otherwise. So for example, you might say, shopping would be a word that I can't imagine any industry would ever want to bid on. But you might say that if they're looking for shopping or they're looking for gifts or something like that, but they've previously interacted with your site, maybe you're getting them in the right time, that you would bid only in that particular time. The other way that we'll use it is sometimes that you might be a keyword that you're already bidding on, but you might choose to bid on extra, or you might even de-emphasize how much you're willing to bid based on how they've interacted with the site previously. I really like what you're suggesting, Chloe, in terms of giving them a different experience based on how they've been to the site before. Mm-hmm. So for example, maybe you don't want to give them straight into a coupon offer or something like that because they've already interacted. Maybe there's some affinity for your brand already. So you can drive them into something else. Or depending what products you've done, you can choose to put them into a category that makes sense or a complementary category that they've visited before. So, just like Google's algorithm on the SEO side is trying to figure out user experience, I think you're doing a really smart suggestion here of how you can replicate that and control that a little bit more on the advertising side.
Well, it just strikes me that for a returning visitor, or you could even create something of people who previously purchased, you want to give them a different set of messages to someone who's been in 20 times before. That just seems, if we've got the tech, why wouldn't we do it? Any other thoughts around RLSA and branded, or should we move on to the next question?
I feel that's been covered really well. So nothing really further to add. I think if people are searching for brands, as you say, I think the likelihood is that the bids are probably quite low already for kind of branded terms. So it'd be interesting to see. I haven't actually separated it out properly before on brand myself, but interested to see what the results will be on that. But generally speaking, on brand terms, the bids are usually fairly low. Although it depends how big the brand is. Obviously, you might have competitors who are bidding a lot of your brand terms, and in that case, you might not really ramp up the bids. But that's a really interesting suggestion.
I love it when these sessions give the panelists ideas. That's always a bit of a secret aim of mine, is if we can manage to get the panelists inspiring each other, then I know we're doing a good job for those of you out there watching. Now, I've seen a couple of you start typing in a question or a comment and then stop. Please, finish typing, send it in. That would be awesome. Oh, and Janice says thank you for the branded ads. She asked the branded ads question. So Janice, I think we went over and above there what you're expecting. And I'm going to add one more thing into branded ads, which is if you're running TV campaigns or offline marketing, make sure you've got enough budget behind that campaign, because someone sees their ad, they type it in, or if there's a key phrase in your ad or something like that, you've got to make sure they can find you, and you don't want that particular campaign running out of budget, because it's a really strong way of making sure the TV campaign, the catalogs, etc. work. Right, we just had a question coming in. Oh, that's a big question. And I should also say Dirk, who's tuning in from South Africa. I think I got that right. I can't see this at the same time. Yes, I did get it right, in Cape Town. Hey, Dirk, thank you for joining us. Has also said that if you're bidding on brand, you get more real estate on that search page. So that's another good point. See, there is no reason not to be bidding on your own brand name. It's a terribly good thing to be doing. And I could talk about it probably for the whole of this hour, but we won't do that. Okay, we'll go to Janice's second question next, whilst I have a think about your question, Naomi, because I want to break it down a bit to make sure we give you loads of value. So I'll think about that whilst the guys answer this one from Janice, which is, any tips for expanding campaigns across to non-English regions? So if we see some sales starting to come in from, I don't know, the Netherlands or Brazil, how do we approach testing that out as a Google Ads arena? Who fancies jumping in on this one? Oh, we got interesting faces. No one jumping in. So Becky, you gave me the most interesting face, so you can tackle this one.
Okay, I'll tackle it. So I think it depends how many countries you want to test at a time. For us, anyway. If you suddenly go from UK to worldwide, for example, I'd suggest doing some groupings there. So maybe do it by continent at the very least. If you're just wanting to test a few different countries or maybe one other, I'd suggest doing a new campaign, a duplicate campaign, and changing the location settings rather than trying to absorb it into your existing campaign. I guess the only exception there might be if you're using automated bidding, because you could lean on some of the learnings in that campaign. But personally, I like to keep it separate and optimize, because it's a different area, and what's worked in one country might not necessarily work in another. So I would always approach it by creating a brand new campaign for that country.
And would you go in the original language, i.e., let's assume English, initially, and do that setting of English speakers before doing translations? Or,
I mean, I would, because I don't translate them. So that's the way we do it. I guess, yeah. If you're getting if you're getting sales from UK ads, and for example, English speaking ads already, and it's just you're getting the data from that, then yeah, keep it in English. If you're seeing it from your Google Analytics, perhaps, then yeah, I mean, the easiest way is to keep the language the same. The easiest way to test it, but you might want to test both versions, in all honesty.
Yeah, and Janice has clarified she's speaking specifically about Germany, Spain, and Italy, all of whom do have quite a lot of people who can happily speak English.
Yeah.
Justin, do many American companies take this route when they're expanding overseas as well? Of English in a country that doesn't speak it?
Yeah, so I know we don't have the best geographic education in the United States, but we are aware that there are other countries in the world. It's one of our favorite things to do, actually, is to run these types of campaigns. And to Janice's point, so many people speak English, and especially we do with a lot of B2B. So B2B is kind of an international, English is an international business language. So you're able to reach people that are speaking that already. And I always say start with English first, depending on what your capabilities are. So what is your website? Do you already have a translation of your website? Do you have the in-house capabilities that if an inquiry comes in, you're able to handle it? If not, stick just definitely in English with everything that you're doing. If you're on an e-commerce site, you can definitely do SKU campaigns. People can look on your site. They can see the picture. They can see the SKU. They can order. It's a little bit easier to do that regardless of the language. So I think understanding what your business capabilities are goes a long way towards this. Becky brought up a really interesting point about automated bidding strategies. I think you have to be careful with that. We used to do this. We ran each country separately, but that became a handful and wasn't allowing Google to maximize a pooled set of conversions from everything. So I really like what she suggested in terms of grouping it by continent or by other shared characteristics so that you can have some sort of sense of what you're doing. Obviously, you can have, I think we've all seen like India and Pakistan, sometimes SKUs results and everything else. So just understanding what you're doing and testing the results there. But yeah, I love doing exactly what you're talking about right now.
And Henry, do you guys do much of this at Ecom One? Any tips for us?
Yeah, a little bit. Probably mainly UK focused. I think a few things which I recommend doing. So kind of firstly in the locations settings, one really important thing to say is that you want to have people who are in your targeted location or frequently in, rather than people interested in. So that's one important thing about their location, because Google can be quite generous in what they consider to be interested in, I would say.
You say generous, I'd say trying to make money.
Exactly, yeah. No, absolutely. One thing I would recommend doing is that if you're just kind of starting out and want to kind of get kind of test the new countries, one thing which Google brought out at the last quarter of last year was what they called free shopping listings. So with that's essentially you get free listings in the Google Shopping tab rather than on the homepage of Google. So it's quite a small percentage of traffic, but I think it's definitely worth opting into the countries which you're interested in, just for the so your kind of listings can appear for free in the tab itself. So that's kind of a no cost option, and you probably will get some kind of clicks and conversions through there. Probably quite a small number. But yeah, I think one thing that we found, which was very interesting, was the bestsellers, which performed really well in the UK, didn't necessarily perform, as Becky said, as well in other countries. So we had a while ago, we were working on a campaign where they had which they sold online jewelry. They had 2 watches, which comprised about 80% of the sales out of like 200 watches. And all these watches always sold all the time in the UK. And then we tried it in Italy and Germany and France, and they didn't really sell very well at all. So I think I'd be pretty cautious in assuming what's going to work well. And I think it's almost like a kind of starting from scratch, in my experience, when you're going for a new country.
Yeah, more good advice. Excellent. We've got questions firing in here. This is good. So we're going to come to the one that I avoided earlier of Naomi's. So Naomi, we're going to tackle yours next, which is, I'm going to leave out the SEO part because we're trying to focus in on the Google ads here. But it is, how do you get started with Google ads? What's the key place? I should say in the podcast, we covered this with Mike Rhodes, who was very much hire an agency / find an expert to at least set it up for you. Obviously, that's not necessarily in the budget of everybody out there. And then there's people like all of us on this call who are perfectly suited to run our own Google ads because we have that kind of aptitude. So what would your each of your advice be on where to start? Or is Mike absolutely spot on and the only option is to get an expert in to give you that initial push? Feel free to jump in, or I will pick a victim.
I have to kick off. So yeah, I think you certainly can kind of run your own Google ads. I think one thing which is absolutely crucial is to get conversion tracking working as a kind of start, which is quite difficult actually. It's more of a technical area probably than actually running the ads itself. So that can be sometimes a bit of a stumbling block, but I think absolutely worth, if you can only kind of, you've got a limited budget, definitely worth getting a web dev or an agency to sort out the tracking first. And if you don't have the tracking, you probably shouldn't be running the campaigns at all, because you're kind of trying to hit it's kind of running blind, I suppose, on that. I'd say another thing I'd recommend doing is starting off everything with very kind of low budgets, then incrementally bumping them up. So you don't want to kind of spend lots and lots of money in the first few months without getting a return. And then I'd say, it's quite an obvious point, but Google run their own free training. So I think that you can go through the certifications. I think they keep on reducing it. So I think the exam is now much, much easier to pass now than it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I would say, which is easier. Which is good for kind of keeping certified, but it's not so good in if you want to get the information. But there's quite a lot of good information on YouTube, I'd say, in kind of seminars and whatnot. But as a starting point, I'd recommend going through the training. And then I mentioned Mike Rhodes. He's actually written a very good book, I think, with Perry Marshall, Ultimate Guide to Google Ads. And that costs about £15 or something like that. So it's pretty cheap, certainly in comparison to hiring an agency. So I definitely have a good read of that as well, because that gives you a lot more practical advice, whereas the Google advice is kind of, to your early point, Chloe, a lot of it's about kind of doing what's in Google's best interest perhaps rather than what's in your best interest. So yeah, I think that ultimate guide is probably quite a good starting point.
Cool. Justin, what about you? Would you recommend someone gives it a go themselves, or is it all just too complex now?
No, well, Google's actually trying to make things simpler. Now, some of those ways that they're making simpler are cash grabs in terms of some of the campaign types that they're trying to put you into. But some of the ways, like with automated bidding strategies, are working well, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. I like to say that when Google Ads back then Google AdWords started, 15, 16 or 20 years ago, the best thing about Google AdWords was that anybody could sign up without an agency by just putting in a credit card and going. And the worst thing about Google AdWords was anybody could sign up without an agency, just putting in a credit card and going. And there is so much information, like Henry was talking about, out there. I happen to know there's at least one author on here who's written some great books to help people get along, and maybe in the background that you can order if you want to look there. But there's so many good ways. There's so much good information to educate yourself moving forward on it. The one major, I shouldn't say major piece of advice, but the one major caution I would give is you have to be in there all the time checking it. This is not a set it and forget it situation. If you do nothing else, please look at your search term reports. So what Google will do is you run on your keywords, and then you give Google a little bit of power to go out and advertise on other things that are like those keywords that you've told Google about. So you're trusting Google to get you other variations, which is legitimate because you can't think of all the different new variations people are coming up with all the time to search for. So you go through a search term report, and it shows you what are those variations that they ended up showing your ads on. So when you go through that, you can see, just like Becky and Henry were talking about before, whether it's brand terms are showing up in places where you wouldn't expect them to be. You can use those negative keywords to stop Google from showing you on things that you want. So just daily monitoring, daily changes that you encounter would be the number one thing I'd recommend.
That, everybody, is why the podcast is called Keep Optimizing, because of my hatred of unoptimized Google Ads campaigns. Right, but enough of my personal problems. Becky, I'm going to rephrase the question slightly for you, which is what we're all talking in our Google Ads coded way here. We're talking about keywords, we're talking about shopping, we're talking about this, but that's a huge wide range of different strategies that someone could explore. So which bit would you say a beginner should start off with? Because launching display and discovery and remarketing and RLSA and keywords and shopping and smart shopping, and I've probably forgotten some, is a bit much on day one. So where would you say these days is the best bit to kick off with?
I think that does vary depending on what you're selling. So if you're selling a brand new product that people wouldn't have heard of, and it does something that people wouldn't necessarily be searching for, then it's pointless bidding on keywords that people aren't going to use. So there's an element of considering that, and actually going back to the original question, one of the first points I think people need to have a chat with someone who knows the different channels, who knows Google Shopping, who knows display, who knows search, and can advise you on which one is probably right for your business. I would say, obviously, we're talking e-commerce here. I'm assuming all the listeners are e-commerce. Google Shopping, I would say, should be the first place to go, because that should give you better conversion rates than search. I say should, because it doesn't always happen. But that with Google Shopping, you can get your product and your price directly in front of people, whereas with the search ads, you're relying on them to click through and find out all that information, whereas the shopping pre-qualifies people to some degree. But again, that is perhaps one of the most complex things to set up. So I think anyone who is new to the world of Google Ads, if you open your account, you don't immediately see start a shop. Well, you might see this start a shopping campaign, but you've got to get your merchant center set up for your feed. So that's
we've got an announcement going on somewhere. Whoever's got the announcement in their real world, could you mute, please? Any idea? So I think it might be Justin based on the accent. So it was coming over loud and clear, whatever that announcement was.
I apologize. I have noise canceling headphones, so I'm not hearing it in the background, but I'm going to go back on mute.
Okay, thanks, Justin. the joys but problems of noise cancelling headphones. So Becky, sorry, you were saying that
Google Shopping is complex to set up, and the feed itself is complex. So you probably will need at least a web developer or someone a bit more techie if you're not a technical person to help you get set up there. But the benefit of starting with Google Shopping campaigns over search is that you don't have to think about which particular keywords to bid on in the same kind of way, because Google will use the feed data to spit the ads out with, and you'll get some really rich search term data that you can then use to build out search campaigns afterwards. So you can see what search terms actually lead to sales and then build out specific search campaigns for that.
Yeah, if you can get it all set up right, then it's quite a safe playpen to start learning the theories and the processes, isn't it? But yeah, it is. It certainly is. Getting the basics set up, the nuts and bolts is really important. And I think it would, to buy an hour of someone who knows what they're doing's time just to double check before you turn it on could save you thousands of pounds over the coming weeks and months. Anything else to add for someone who's about warnings, or anything else for anyone who's about to start before we go on to the next question? Henry, anything else from you?
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate some of the point that's been made, aside from Justin's point, is that it's really not a set and forget thing. So you've got to have a management routine in place, I would say, and just have we at our agency, we very much work to having kind of weekly, bi-weekly, monthly tasks that we're always kind of checking, and then big quarterly audits. So yeah, you definitely don't want to just set something up and forget about it. Otherwise that could, it's likely to lead to a lot of cost and not many kind of conversions, unless you're exceptionally lucky, but that's very unlikely. Yeah. So yeah, I suppose it's not actually Google, but I suppose it kind of depends what you're short on. If you're kind of short on time or short on money, I suppose if you're kind of struggling for budget and you want your ads to do something, I think one thing which could work well was actually be on the Facebook side and doing Facebook dynamic remarketing ads. We find those have a kind of exceptionally high return on ad spend for quite a small amount of input. I think the input's quite large, the real setup bit, but I think once they're running, essentially you're kind of showing people the products which they kind of expressed interest in, kind of clicked on your website. So I think if you've got quite a limited budget, I might recommend getting that set up. It's not actually kind of Google Ads, but it's I suppose it's related.
It's in the same wheelhouse, isn't it?
It's in the same wheelhouse, yeah.
It's I was wondering if we could make it the whole way through without mentioning Facebook. Yeah, I didn't think we would. We should have done a sweepstake at the beginning, shouldn't we, for everybody? A free book to those who guessed 34 minutes. But that's an opportunity for next time. Maybe we'll do that with the next one when we're talking SEO. How long can we go before someone mentions Google Ads? I reckon about 3 minutes, but we'll see. Okay, cool. So that was the startup tip. So I hope, Naomi, that's given you some good questions. Oh yes, she says thank you, really useful. So good luck with that. Do let us know how you get on. And then Dirk's come in with a question, which is some tips to optimize Google Shopping campaigns to reduce conversion costs. We're finding they're often more expensive than traditional campaigns. Is this simply display ads being less effective across the board? And before we get into the main question, I wouldn't have said Google Shopping campaigns are display ads, because they appear on the Google Search Network, don't they? Okay, we're going to ignore that bit of your question, Dirk, until we get more information. Oh, we lost Becky.
And Chloe, I'm sorry. Just one thing I would ask is he running smart shopping campaigns or traditional shopping campaigns? Because if it is a smart shopping campaign, it could be showing up in the display network and other places as well.
Dirk is typing. So we'll find out the answer to that in a moment. Let's assume it's normal Google Shopping, or traditional. It is normal traditional Google Shopping. So guys, until Becky reappears, which hopefully she will, what would your advice be to reduce conversion costs on Google Shopping campaigns? Justin, we'll start with you as you were getting some clarification there.
So my first piece of advice would be to try smart shopping campaigns. I've been dealing with Google, as long as I think all of you all have, for the past 20 years, and I don't trust automatically everything Google tells me. In fact, I come with a healthy degree of skepticism with things that they suggest. And for many, many years, they talked about how they wanted, they're trying to push their automation. For many, many years, Google's automation was left things to be desired, if I'm going to be kind to them. It's gotten better over the last couple of years. And so I think when we talk automated bidding strategies, when we talk some of these opportunities, there are things that we wouldn't have suggested before that we suggest now. So we've almost across the board had better results with smart shopping campaigns than we have with the traditional types of shopping campaigns. So my first piece of advice would be to try that out. The one thing where it can be difficult is if there's not a lot of conversion data for the account to go off of. So assuming that you have conversions, that this has been successful for you, that Google can leverage that information, that's the first place I'd start. I'm happy to talk about negative keywords. I'm happy to talk about other types of things they can do to do, like breaking out campaigns based on profit margins, breaking out campaigns based on sales prices, using extensions, using offers, all of those things. But the first thing I'd recommend is trying to smart shopping campaigns.
That's the thing, isn't it? As Google tries to catch up with Facebook, because for the last 5 years, just for those of you out there listening, Facebook, you can kind of trust their algorithm, and they're generally trying to help you make more money, so they make more money. With Google, generally the automations have been a little dodgy and mainly set up to help Google make money rather than you. But now there's a few of them coming through as they're trying to catch up with Facebook. There are some really awesome ones which actually help. So the automated bidding can be really powerful, and just like Justin ran through, smart shopping can be a gift to improving the performance on your Google shopping campaigns. Henry, Becky, anything you guys would like to add? Maybe dive in some of those bits that Justin just tantalized us with there, in terms of other ways of improving the cost per conversion on Google shopping campaigns.
Yep.
Sorry, I just left a massive gap there, and then you both. I'm sorry, Henry. We'll go to you first.
Sure. So I'll probably have two recommendations. So the first thing that we always check out when we're auditing an account is the percentage of spend and the relative return coming back from mobile device. So if you go into the devices, it's a really, really quick change that you can make by decreasing, in probably 80-90% of cases, decreasing the mobile bid adjustment. So what we commonly see is that mobile now is probably the most important device in terms of generating the highest number of clicks, generating the highest amount of conversion value. But what we're still seeing for most of our accounts is that the conversion rates are quite a lot lower on mobile. So very commonly in an optimized account, it might be kind of 60 to 75% of the spend is coming through on mobile, but perhaps only 40 to 50% of the conversion value. Which means the cost per conversion there is too expensive, and the return on spend is usually quite poor. So one quite quick thing you can do is just go through your accounts and decrease that mobile adjustment.
Nice.
So that would be the...
I like that quick fire tip, Dirk. That might only take you 5 seconds. That could be problem solved. Okay, you said you had a second one, Henry. So what was number 2?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to the promo for the webinar that I was doing. But on that one, it's called the 80-20 principle, or the 80-20 kind of way of managing Google Shopping. So yeah, very much in favor of these very small adjustments, small in terms of time, which can then have quite a big input or big kind of effect on the results. And then the other one is what I'd recommend doing is bidding individually by SKU. And then what you want to do is use the filters. So you want to filter by cost, and then probably you want to another filter of kind of return on ad spend, or you could do it by cost per conversion. And then you want to see what are the most expensive SKUs in your account, and are they profitable? And if they're not profitable, then you want to add quite a significant decrease in bids on them if you're running the campaigns manually. So yeah, I think using the filters and then looking at individual SKUs, you can also run a kind of campaign level to see what's the most expensive. And again, going back to this kind of 80-20 theme, is often about kind of 20%, often quite a lot under that, of the products in your account which generate 80% of the spend, but they're very frequently not the 20% generating 80% of the value. So those would be my 2 tips.
Got it. So just to clarify, we're using the filters to find the problems, and then we're making a bid adjustment to fix the problem.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I see people going, "Oh, what do the filters do?"
Yeah.
They just wanted to make it clear what we were using each of those for. Okay, cool. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, and we'll mention again, the free webinar that they're running at Ecom One, which you've got a link to if you're live there, but you will have a link to in the follow-up or somewhere near this video, wherever you happen to be watching it. That is all about improving your Google Shopping performance. And of course, we'll add the free consultations that both Becky and Justin are offering. We'll remind you of all of that stuff later too. And whilst I've paused, before we come to Becky, who's on tenterhooks to give you her Google Shopping improvement tips, do ask your questions now. We've got about 15 minutes still to go, so we've got time for more questions. So if you've only just joined us, add your questions now. If you've joined us and you're going, "Oh, I'm tempted to ask," no question is too big or too small, too advanced or too straightforward. So please do add those questions now, because we've still got time to probably get 1 or 2 more answered. So Becky, to you.
Yes. Sorry, I missed the start of Justin's answer. Sorry, I apologise if I'm covering the same, but I do want to touch on the
Becky, you're breaking up slightly. Have you got is there something suddenly downloading or something? Because all of a sudden you started breaking up on your feed.
Oh,
okay.
No. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, apologies. One thing is automated bidding and testing that. I know Justin touched on it, but I will be covering this at your summit next week, Chloe. So for anyone who wants to know more about the different automated bidding strategies, come join me over there. I won't go into too much detail, but you can make some good savings there. And I think the really important thing, if you are going to use automated bidding strategies, is to make sure your shopping campaigns are segmented well. And again, Justin, I know you already touched on that point as well. But if you've got different brands with different margins, you're going to need different campaigns set up to tell Google that you need different targets for those. So segment. I think the other thing would be optimize your feed, if that's not already been covered. Don't forget the feed is the thing that powers your shopping campaign, and it's not a case of necessarily just grabbing the one from your website, sticking that into Merchant Center and leaving it at that. If you can improve your product titles and descriptions, that will help give Google more information about what your products are, which will help more people find them. So don't just plug your feed in and think that's that. Have a look at how the ads look. See, does the image look right? It needs to be a nice clear image. How does it compare to your competitor's listing? Is there anything you can do to just tweak those listings there in the feed?
Nice. No, we hadn't mentioned feed yet. So that's kind of like, I always think that the feed with Google Shopping is something we all kind of go, well, it's working. Let's find something else to work on, because changing that feels difficult.
And it can be. But it depends how many SKUs you've got. I mean, if you're selling a small amount and you can just stick it in a Google Sheet and build it there yourself, that's always fun. If you've got lots and lots, you might need some feed management software or something like that, or you can just use the Merchant Center feed rules to add some terms in that way. It's a bit clunky, it's not much fun, but there are little ways around it.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm for a company with a small SKU set or a not often changing SKU set, the Google Sheets option can be a total game changer and actually enable you to do stuff that bigger companies just can't, because you can literally change your feed whenever you want to. Which is a great thing. We haven't mentioned custom labels. Who would like to give us some greatness about custom labels? Because we can't talk about improving the performance of a Google Shopping campaign and not talk custom labels. Justin, do you fancy tackling that one?
Sorry, because my dad, who has the big, loud, booming voice in the background, I'm staying on mute as much as I can. I texted him. I don't know if he got the text, but I haven't heard it. So apologies for that. Yeah, custom labels it's kind of that monopoly, do not pass go thing. You have to use them, whether it's information. It allows you to put whatever information you want onto the feed. So you can break things up by profit margins. You can break up things based on sales. So whatever information that you want to use to be able to promote a little bit differently, or to be able to put a little different emphasis on in your campaigns and measures separately, you're going to be able to do that with custom labels. So I'm sure Henry and Becky can talk about awesome ways you can use them, but as a starting point, if assuming you have a big enough SKU set, it just doesn't make sense not to use them.
And this is a question to all of you, really. There's obviously that we have 5 custom labels that we can use, and you could use them for absolutely anything. You could use them as to whether Katie in accounts likes the product or not. You could use a custom label for if you wanted to. I don't think it would help you, but you could do it. So the sky literally is the limit with them. So a follow-up question from me on this. And guys, if you want, those of you watching, if you want another question answered, get it in the box now. Otherwise, we're going with my questions until the end because I've got some I want to ask. So now's your opportunity. So what are the no-brainers? Because I know we have to do a bit of testing to work out what we could or couldn't use, or what works for us and what doesn't. But what are the absolute no-brainers? You've got to get this into a custom label if you can. Henry, I'll come to you first on this one.
Yeah, sure. So probably a couple. So I'd say you can do it by profitability. We quite like using price break as well. So with your kind of SKUs, you can split them to kind of buckets of, say, 0 to £5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, kind of, etc. And then that can be very, very helpful, we find, in setting a kind of starting bid. So you can kind of use your, what you kind of consider to be your average conversion rate, and you can use that information to set the appropriate bid. So yeah, we find that can be really, really helpful to kind of start off with using that custom label. And then another one which we use quite a bit is for seasonality. So particularly for clothing, we find there's kind of, you've got winter clothes and summer clothes. It's probably not the best time of year to be selling fur coats right now, although it's kind of been up and down the weather, obviously, so can't say that for certain. But yeah, I think kind of a seasonality one can be really useful and do a pretty significant changes. Kind of select all products and then decrease by X amount if a product is not seasonal. So those are probably my favorite ones, or at least the ones which I use the most, kind of seasonality and kind of and yeah, the price break as well.
Becky, anything to add to that?
No, I think they're kind of the best, most common ones we use. We've had some rather niche ones, like using colours if your product is very visual, and you want to use kind of, we had a paint company and they had all these lovely names for their products like Moonlight Black and stuff. So if you just want to group things into black, it's a form of black, then you can use it to group colorings like that. But that's a rarity, that one.
Cool, excellent. Well, look, we're going to go on to a topic which was front of mind for me a second ago. Then I got distracted. What was the topic? We just talked Google Shopping. There was CSS. That was the really obvious place to go from Google Shopping. So for those of you watching who aren't sure what CSS is where you, rather than putting your Google Shopping feed into Google and running the ads via Google, you put your Google Shopping feed into a Google partner and you run the ads via them. So if you see, when you do a search on Google, you see that the shopping has by Kelku or by someone who isn't Google underneath it, that is a CSS running, which I think we can only do this in the UK. I don't think you can do this in the US, can you? Because I think I think you can only do it across Europe because it was a European, Henry's nodding a lot there. It was a European anti-monopoly move that made Google have to open this up to everybody. And
yeah, they got a huge fine for it, Google. I think it was something insane, like 4 billion euros, or it might have been even more. I can't remember exactly how much it was. But yeah, as I said, it's the European Commission who found that. So it was a European fine. Yeah.
But when it first came out, we had people saying you should only use it if you've maximized the potential of your own Google shopping campaign on Google. Then I hear other people who are going, go everywhere, sign up with everything and have loads of it. And people saying, put one feed in there and another feed and use it for testing. Are there any successful strategies with CSS usage that you guys have seen with accounts or anywhere. Becky, you're nodding a lot there.
Yeah, well, I haven't got masses of experience with it, but I think the biggest thing I've seen from a couple of accounts who've got CSS running in is that it brings down the click costs. So they get, I think, a 20% discount on click costs. That's hard to say. So if you have tight margins and you are just looking for a way to bring down your average cost per click, trying out a different CSS might be the solution for you. We've run them alongside the Google one, and generally you do get cheaper click costs. So that's kind of the biggest success we've seen with CSS.
So straightforward money saving.
Straightforward money saving.
To the point where you'd advise anyone in Europe to use that rather than Google, or? We'll take that as a no.
I suggest that they test it. I mean, this was a free one that we were using. So if it's free to try, give it a try and see if it's cheaper for you. I don't know enough about the paid ones and whether the incremental gain there would be worth it.
Henry, any experience with these?
Yes, we also use a free one. One thing, interestingly, actually, what we see is we actually ended up, when we added to CSS, we didn't actually necessarily see a cost saving, which is interesting, but we saw a lot more clicks coming through and a better return on ad spend. I think what interesting and what seemed to have happened, although it's a kind of you kind of don't pay the extra 20% cost, which would otherwise go to Google. So it almost seems like your ads would appear as if they're more expensive, if that makes sense. So it's like if you've got say kind of £1 bid. What was interesting was that it wasn't as if you would be then paying 80p. It's like you're paying that £1, but appearing as if you're £1.20. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the kind of, from what we've seen, that seems to be more the direction. So you just end up getting a lot more clicks, but you are paying less per click in a way, but it's more like you're kind of appearing as if your click was more expensive. So we actually ended up seeing a lot more clicks. And overall, we didn't see a massive cost saving, which was interesting. But we were seeing kind of a better ROAS and more conversions, which was it was definitely a good thing and something which we would recommend a lot of our clients doing. But it's interesting. We were expecting that we'd see a big decrease in costs, but that's not how it turned out.
I guess when you're playing around with any kind of bidding auction strategy, it's whether you bank the cash or whether you use the cash to generate bigger cash at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So to Becky's point, you could do, at the point at which you switched over, you could then just drop all your bids by 20%, and then you'd see that saving, and you'd probably still get all the clicks you were getting, or a lot of them. But it's always quite difficult, I think, comparing before and after, because there's so many other factors which come into play, like the whole kind of pandemic. It's like that completely. It's not like you're kind of comparing a perfect set of data. It's always everything shifts so much, doesn't it? So it's quite difficult to really have a.
Anyone currently trying to do year-on-year comparisons of performance, as we stand here in May, are going, in fact, technically we're in June now, aren't we? But look, anyone who's trying to do May's monthly performance is just going, none of it makes any sense anymore. Right, we are going to end the questions there. Audience, thank you for asking such good questions. We covered an awful lot of ground in this. Huge thank you to my panelists. Actually, let's bring back up on screen that call to action slide. If I can find the right buttons. Where have we gone? That one's right. That one we want. Then I hit this. You would have thought by now I'd have made this slicker. Unfortunately, not everyone. You should have put up with me trying to find the right thing. There we go. You should now be able to see all today's guests twice. Once on the slides and once on the videos. So we've had Becky Hopkin from Digital Gearbox, who are offering a free pay-per-click consultation via keepoptimizing.com/crew. Justin Seibert from Direct Online Marketing, who are offering a website SEO and digital ads audit totally for free as well at directom.com/keep. And Henry Gill from Ecom One, who are running that free webinar on Google Shopping, which you can get at training.ecom1.com/shopping-ads-webinar. And if you are struggling to write all of that down, don't worry, it's coming to you in an email afterwards. It's in the chat if you're here live. And if you're watching this some other place, it's somewhere around this video that you will be able to see. So huge thank you, Henry, Becky, Justin. Thank you for being on the webinar today. Next up this month, in fact, in June, we are covering SEO. So tomorrow we have a session all about taking competitor analysis beyond benchmarking. The following week, we're going to be doing faceted navigation with Luke Carthy. Quality session, that one is really good. We've then got shifting our thinking from keywords to entities, which will make your mind bend with Dixon Jones from Inlinks. We are then tackling blogging from a very cool angle with Adam Bastock. And then we're rounding out the month doing an interesting side angle on SEO of how to use SEO to beat all those new competitors. And we've got advice both for if you're one of those new competitors who've gone e-commerce since the pandemic began, but also we have what to do if you're being threatened by those new competitors. So we're kind of tackling it from both sides. And finally, Becky mentioned this earlier. Next week, it's my totally free eCommerce MasterPlan virtual summit. We've got 2 days. Day 1 is all about customer acquisition. Day 2 is all about customer retention. I've got 6 people lined up to talk to you on each day who are all brilliant. Someone was commenting on Facebook going, I don't know who any of these people are. I'm not signing up. I was like, 1, why don't you know who they are? You clearly don't know anything about e-commerce. 2, I don't pick them because they've got a big Twitter following or because they've been in 20 other conferences. I pick them because they are amazing at what they do. So there you go. That's why you should join in. We'll be doing live Q&As like this, where hopefully I'll be slightly slicker on the tech at the end of each day. And it's going to be packed with awesome stuff you need to know to take your business to the next level. Sign-ups are going crazy already. I am flabbergasted, quite frankly. Big English word there, flabbergasted by how many people have signed up. So please do come and join us. keepopt.com/summit will take you there. And there's probably a link to it somewhere around this video, wherever you are. Right. From me and from the 3 marvelous Google Ads experts we've had on today, thank you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Bye, everybody.